Get ready to be inspired because today we have the incredible Travonnie joining us with a vibrant personality that radiates positivity and passion. Travonnie isn't just a leader, she's a force of nature. From advocating for educators to creating inclusive cultures, she approaches every challenge with creativity and heart. Her infectious enthusiasm for empowering others would have you on the edge for your seat as she shares her unique journey from the classroom to coaching and beyond. So stay tuned for an episode filled with wisdom, laughter, and a dose of inspiration. Welcome to Growth Leaders by Shots,
Oh
Travonnie.
my
I should.
gosh.
My gosh, yeah. It's great
That was
having
a
you
beautiful
here.
intro. Thank
Thank
you.
you, dear. So, you are the co-founder of Empact. You talk about the path to impact. That firstly, does impact stand for empathy and impact? Or
Yeah, it's the combination of those two words. People are like, why are you all spelling it with an E? And I think, the corny but very serious reason behind it is you can't actually get to impact in business without taking care of your people. And so when we decided to start a firm and figure out what sets us apart, it's that all of our work is heart centered, it's people centered, and it's not fluffy. It's not like, let's,
mm,
do the warm and fuzzy, but it is what does it look like to run a business that's prioritizing taking care of people? Yeah.
and what is the path to impact? How would you
Mm,
describe that? See,
yes.
because I know you make a difference for
Yeah.
companies and the people you're working there. So I'm very curious
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. I think, let's see, at a high level, the first thing you want to do is actually assess your impact. What are people experiencing in the organization? And I think what we've found is that organizations have gotten used to people being slightly disgruntled. That's the norm, right? Just like, yep, work is
Mm,
kind of rough. We know. And so when people give feedback, it's often dismissed as a thing that we probably won't solve. And so we start with this idea that everybody should actually love their job. And when we set that as the level playing field of when the company is doing a good job, then we start to think about what the actions need to look like. And we think there are three things. That means managers need to be highly competent. There's a lot of people thrown into leadership positions without any sense of, hey, here's what it means to be a manager. They're
mm,
probably brilliant functional expertise minds, but never thought about what it means to get people motivated and inspired and productive and really moving towards a common goal. So manager competency is the first part of our framework. The second part is the orientations. We have a lot of companies that talk about their values and a lot of staff who say, I don't feel those things. Hey, like I don't feel them at all. They're on your
okay.
website, they're in our external material, but I don't feel them when I show up every day. And so we
Not connected.
translate, yeah, they're very disconnected.
Mm,
We translate those values into what we call orientations that are observable, where I can see if this is what you believe, here's how we show up every day. And so building out manager competency, organizational orientations is two parts. The last thing that matters is you have to fix the system. And so if you have a handful of really passionate managers who are taking care of their people, and you have a culture of like, let's be transparent and supportive, that goes a long way. But at the end of the day, if my performance review tells me I'm still not enough, then you really don't land the message that you can feel valued here. So Path to Impact looks like a lot of systemic change, looks like a lot of manager training, and sometimes it includes some revamp of talent systems that people are just used to. We've just kind of always done
mm,
it this way. We've never really paused to think about why this system is harmful. So we fix all of that. And so when you know
no,
you've done it well, you don't have people who hate work anymore.
yeah, that's the way to get things running, getting them
Hmm.
motivated and understand
Yeah.
why they are a purpose. So, what type of companies are
Yeah.
you working with today? Because Impact is a fairly young company, but you're
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
making impact. And what type of companies are you
I would say
working with and
predominantly our
want to work
clients
with?
are, yeah, predominantly our clients are small nonprofits, small to mid-sized nonprofits. And I think the reason why we've matched so easily is that they've made a very public statement about who they are, right? Like their mission is core. It's the reason why people come work for them. And so their staff are saying, hey, you got this public facing persona that you're here for the people and you care, but internally, I don't feel that. And so I think that's majority of our clients right now find themselves in that space where they're really trying to match those values with how they show up for their staff every day. I think we'd love to be working with more corporations. They have the exact same issues, and the solutions are
Mm,
very similar, slightly tweaked. And so,
mm,
there's also this out where you can almost say, I don't actually have to be a great employer. You're lucky to work here. And so,
mm,
trying to really break down that barrier because you won't retain staff that way. I think what we've seen with this, post-COVID environment is the talent sector is an
mm.
employer's market right now. Employers don't have to be great. Everybody just needs a job. And I think as
Yeah.
that pendulum swings, you feel it.
So how do you create a baseline when you move into a company to know, okay, here's where we are, and this
Yeah,
is what we now have agreed upon and where we want to be. So
yep.
is that through a Net Promoter Score, or how do you do?
Yeah, that's definitely our starting place. We survey the staff, we do focus groups with the team, we take a look at the policies in place and get a sense of how likely are people to have a good experience here, no matter their identity. And so Net
Mm,
Promoter Score can be really telling. I think oftentimes people just look at the raw number. What I pay more attention to is, do you have more detractors than promoters? Do you have more people who
mm,
would say, hey, friend, don't work here? Like I'm here, but I'm having a time. And tell their colleagues and their former members of their network that this is not a place I'd encourage you to apply. When you have more of those than people who are like on fire for the company, then you don't have strong culture. And as hard as you try to
mm,
fix your systems and your policies, you run into the people who are very critical, understandably, of whether or not the organization is going to get any better. And so understanding your net promoter score is a great starting place. And so you can really start to get a sense of, where are people not having a good experience? And is that
mm.
about our policies? Is it about our managers? Is it about our values not transferring? And then I think you have to decide you care about that. Some, once you see
Mm.
the data, some people say,
So,
well, they're not the right people for us. And so I think that's a big step.
yeah, exactly. So, initiating change.
Yeah.
In most corporations, I mean, change has to be initiated from the
Yeah.
top. Understand that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you are in non-profit organizations, how do you get in contact, and or is there enough people saying, well, we need to make something. Who should I call?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's a good
because
question.
initiating change has to be understanding that there has to be something done. Has to
Yeah.
come from some executives.
That's a good point. I think our entry point to the work is often that head of talent, that chief people officer who's fielding all the grievances of the organization. Most times, organizations are willing to do a compensation study. If staff are
Mm,
saying, I'm feeling undervalued, you're not paying me well, everybody kind of knows, all right, we should go do some benchmark research and look at wages and see where we are on that. So that's a perfect entry point because we're doing the tip of the iceberg thing. We're like fixing
mm,
salaries. When you fix salaries, it opens a can of worms of like, wait, why did we pay people the way we did? Why are people on the scale where they are? And can we actually justify it? And most times you can't. When you look at that, and
mm,
staff want to know, right? Why do you have me at the bottom of the range and not at the top? And how do I get there? And so that
mm,
forces the company to answer some questions they've never answered before. And then we get to the meat of the work. But I
mm,
think if that head of talent is not bought in or willing to do this work, we don't get very far. For my smaller teams, they don't actually have a head of talent. So I'm working directly
mm,
with an ED or a CEO who is
mm.
hearing the feedback and going, all right, I want to fix this, but I need help. And I
Yeah.
think, that's the thing that keeps me energized, Peter, because there's an assumption, there's this us them dynamic, but every leader I've talked to wants to fix it, every single one. They just don't know
Mm,
how, they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the
mm.
tools, but there's not a lack
Exactly.
of willingness. Yeah. And I think
Mm.
that makes it easy to get started.
And then you also have, when you have that insight, it's also easy for you to reach out, especially when you get a number
Yeah.
of NGOs successfully move forward. So
Yeah.
every leader has a unique fingerprint. how would you define your own
Mm,
fingerprints? And we could
yeah.
also look back how your leadership style has evolved over time.
Yeah. That's a good question. I think there's something to this empathy piece that
Yeah.
hit me early on that I think has been a continuous thread across my leadership. There's a lot of times where I interact with a leader who's doing the blame game and really not able to see, how did this person get here? Yes, they're disgruntled, they're frustrated, but can I sit in their seat for a minute and understand what they've experienced? And when I do that, I gain trust really quickly and effectively. And then people tell me what they're actually worried about, what they're frustrated about. And then we can solve it. And that, I feel like I've navigated my entire leadership journey with that as a forefront. Where I think that things have changed for me is I started out
Yeah.
as a little bit of a rambunctious advocate where, in the class, as a classroom teacher for a long time. And if you're not doing right by
Mm,
my babies, we're going to talk about it. Like, we're going to get this right for the kids. And so I think there's some finesse that has developed across my leadership journey to say, and so what does influence look like here? And who are the
mm,
power players in this situation? And what are they worried about? Right? How do I connect with them so that there's not this us them dynamic between me and the people I need to influence? So I'm still an advocate, but I've come to believe that advocacy is actually bad. Advocacy
mm,
means the system is broken. And if we're relying on
mm,
advocates, then we're always going to be stuck. I don't take for granted that I'm a Black woman trying to create systems change. And there's a dynamic of people just deciding my voice is not credible, not even
mm,
intentionally, just because we've been
mm.
socialized to do so. So I understand the layers that I have to peel back to get to the heart of what people are feeling.
Yeah. Starts everything with, as you say, building the trust with the
Yeah,
people, and then build it from there,
yeah,
and then identify the root causes. Has there been any
yeah,
defining moments in your career that's changed how you lead now when you're on your
yeah,
own feet also?
yeah. I think when I became a mom, it was a big deal for me in my leadership journey. I grew up with an entrepreneur mom who was super busy, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I do want to balance this. And I think the thing that became really important to me was understanding success. And that's been a driving factor in my journey is we don't define success very well, especially in education and nonprofit. Success looks like who's working the hardest, who's staying the longest, who's here the earliest, who's willing to take on the most projects without compensation. We've really started to measure people's dedication in time. And because I was a new
Hmm.
mom, I did not have that. Right. And so it was like,
No.
hey, you're not going to tell me I don't care about this as much as I really do. Tell me what success would look like. What are the metrics that I'm using to drive my work? And when I hit that, I'm going to close my computer. I'm going to go play with my kid. And I think,
Yeah.
it's why our primary offering is performance management design. Because if you can tell people, if you do this, you've done enough, and we're not questioning your dedication anymore, then you can have people
Mm.
go, oh, great, I'm going to take a day off, right? And I'll be back.
Mm.
But I think right now, everybody's still just trying to prove themselves.
So how do you translate that to the kids? I don't know how old your kids are, so it may be a wrong question,
Yeah.
but
No.
how do you how do you translate? Well, you've been teacher also, so it goes for the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you translate success to them growing up?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's such a good question. I talk with my 12-year-old most about this. I think he is always trying to find the easiest way to do something. And there are some
Mm.
times when I think about how that's frustrating for me because I want him to embrace challenge and be willing to work through hard things. I think beautiful experiences are on the other side of hard work. And my kid is
Mm.
looking for the easiest pathway all the time. And so when I think about performance management design and like what is success, it's allowed me to let him be a little bit of who he is because he's meeting the bar. And I think I have two others, my 7-year-old and my 2-year-old. We don't talk about this with her, but my 7-year-old actually struggles with perfectionism already. I
Mm.
see, I definitely grew up worrying about getting A's and, not ever getting in trouble at school. And what I've said to him is, it's about your learning and your growth, and mistakes are good. And here's how we channel mistakes and build our brain. So just trying to channel some of that growth mindset
Mm.
research that I think I didn't have as a kid that led me to feel inadequate without not
Mm.
getting a perfect score on an assessment.
And at least from what I've seen, and that goes also to sports, that you don't have to be, on your best in your early. You may have to fight for learning. You have to fight to be a
Yeah.
good soccer player. You have to fight. But, when you get up in your 20s, then it comes because, and you are
Yeah.
used to working hard. And the
Yeah.
guys and girls who have an easy path, they start to struggle because they have to suddenly
Yeah.
put in the fight.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly. I
if,
think it's hard. It's hard for parents to watch their kids struggle.
mm,
So I think you're hitting on something important. Um, and I think it's the secret sauce is that you give them just enough struggle that they build some character. And so I don't always get that right. I definitely do more for them than I want to sometimes, but it's definitely the
mm,
goal. Yeah.
yeah, well, that's the thing to be a parent. That's sure.
Yeah.
So let's see, inspiration, and that is a lot what you talk about. What inspires you, and who and what inspires you on a daily basis?
Yeah. I think my kids is a good starting place since we were just there. It's great to
Yeah.
see their natural curiosity, their natural problem solving ability, and grateful that I was a teacher first before I was a mom. And they keep me looking at the world differently and going, huh, that's definitely number one. My clients are number two, and I hinted at this earlier, but I kind of have access to these leaders in a way that their staff don't always get to see, where they're
Mm,
vulnerable, where they're processing how their biases led to bad decisions, where they're really thinking about who they give preferential treatment to and why, and where in their leadership journey they became worried about not being liked or respected. I get to have those intimate spaces with them, and it leads to actual change. It leads to policy change. It leads
mm.
them to address their staff differently. It leads them to apologize for harm caused. And every time I see one of those moments, I'm like, oh, I love my job. And I tell my team all the time, like, y'all, look at what this leader did
Uh,
today. And it's corny, Peter. I feel a little bit like a crazy person, but I genuinely get excited to see people shift their practice. I think
mm.
the connection I make to that is growing up, I watched a lot of HGTV. And the last 30 seconds of the episode where they're like, look at the review. That's what it feels like for me. I'm like, this reveal of this
Yeah.
like deepened leader. So
Mm.
they get me really excited to just take on more challenge. I love that part of the work.
And where and how do you, bring your creativity to grow? I mean, it could
Mm,
be in the customer, there are problems, and you may
yeah,
not have the answers directly, but where do
yeah.
you get your creativity from?
Mm.
Is it when you wake up in the morning? Are you out
Oh,
running? Or, I mean, because you have
yeah.
to have some space.
Yeah, I love that you framed it that way. I think I spoke earlier to our orientations is a thing that we design for clients. We set it for ourselves too. So we know what our values are. And one of our orientations is space because we believe that
Mm,
if you don't give people space, they don't get creative. They don't solve problems that we've always had. They just churn and do the work in front of them. And so, we decided that when we're building out our work week and our capacity planning, it starts with 32 hours, not 40, because we assume that there's 8 hours of you just getting to think, right? And so,
mm,
of the 32 that we want to schedule for people, what do we expect people to get done? And I think, when I don't have enough space, my team will cancel stuff on my calendar. And then I
mm,
realized, like, oh, I solved something that day that you made me not go to a meeting. So I think that is not normal for companies to decide that we actually want people to innovate and get creative and solve new problems, and that requires them to have time to think. And so
mm.
we're pretty good at that, and I get in trouble a lot when I overschedule myself. Um,
Yeah.
and then I think the last source of inspiration is the staff of my clients. I'm working
Mm,
with that CEO and that chief people officer pretty closely, but I feel most effective when I also get to meet their team and they have the
mm,
solutions already. It
yeah.
might sound like I'm coming up with them, but they've
Mm,
already been thinking about it would be so great if y'all did this. So I'm just
yeah.
matching that energy at the right time when the leaders are open and ready to hear it. And I think we're very clear that we're going to do stuff you never did before. What you've done
Mm.
before is not working, so we're not just tweaking that. Throw it out. Let's start over and see if you get a better result.
And that reminds me, I've been working many years as you can say, a turnaround specialist. So
Mm,
there's 8 to 10
nice.
companies been done, but you have all these infections in the companies, and of course you're not getting the profits or the revenue growth. But I
Yeah,
mean, the answers are always inside the company.
they
You
are.
just have to figure it out, and then have to
Mm,
get rid of the stuff which is not working, and really
yeah.
motivate people on the right movements.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah,
quite interesting. Someone
that's
just
a good
stepping into
call.
leadership role, what golden advice would you give her, him?
So many. We'll try to narrow it down.
Yes.
I think I think two headlines. Make sure people are following you is the first one. I have a lot of leaders
Mm.
who call themselves leaders, but haven't paused to see if anybody is going to follow. And I think, the
What
positional
makes them?
title,
Why should I follow?
why should they follow?
Yeah.
I think it's
So
you follow.
what makes people follow him up?
Yeah, good question. I think you follow people who know where you're going. You don't get behind somebody who's lost and say, "All right, I'll come with you." So there needs to be clarity and mission and vision and strategy. You follow people who seem to be strong enough for the journey. You don't follow people who look like they can't handle the ride, right? You wouldn't get in a
Mm,
car that looks like it won't make the journey. And you follow people who are going to be honest with you. Hey, we're lost. Need to stop and get some gas, right? Where you
mm,
feel a little bit brought in the loop along the way. And so that was going to be my second point for a new
mm,
leader. There's a resistance to transparency that I think is detrimental for a lot of leaders. This idea that I need to keep knowledge over here that my staff don't need, it's patronizing and it doesn't work. So the more
no.
you pull people in, the more, even if it's a mess. And I think there's an assumption that, like, if it's a mess, I need to hide that and then my staff will respect me and trust me. Doesn't work. They see your mess. Hey, I think more
Mm,
effectively you say, hey, it's a mess over here. I'm going to solve that. And here's what I'm trying. Here's what I'm struggling with. Do you have an idea that I don't have? Great. Okay. Now let me go do my job. I'm not going to put that on you to fix it. And I'll come back. And then people will follow you. But
mm,
there's this thing I keep hearing leaders do where they're not holding themselves accountable for that following. They're assuming that if people aren't following me, they're the problem and they need some training and they need to be talked to or held accountable. I'm like, no, you're the one accountable for people's
mm.
willingness to follow. And so starting there matters to me a whole lot.
And those are so important and clever advice. Now, Travonnie, rapid fire
Yes.
round.
Okay.
Are you are
Ready.
you an early bird or a night owl?
Early bird. My brain is on fire at 5 a.m.
I recognize that. What's the book or podcast that never fails to inspire you?
Small Great Things, Jodi Picoult. It is the best book I ever read because it forced me to have empathy for the antagonist. I've never experienced that level of care for the person I hated in the story, and I think that says a lot about how we show up in society.
Okay, I haven't read that. That's interesting.
Oh, it's a good one.
Describe yourself. Yeah, that's great. And one thing you absolutely can't live without. Thing.
Probably my phone. I hate to
Okay.
be a cliche there, but it's my little personal assistant Siri is my favorite.
Mountains or beaches? Where do you find peace?
Beaches, always beaches. I love the water, love the infinite outlook of the horizon.
And what's the best advice you've ever received?
I had someone tell me when I was looking for answers that actually you've hit a point where you're the mentor. And it was alarming to me that I wasn't allowed to ask people to solve things for me anymore. You're like, nope, you've hit a point in your career where you know just as much as the people you're asking to help, and you need to be taking ownership of the solutions. And so I've not turned back ever since.
Thank you. Great talking to you today. So many good
Likewise.
insights and sharing. So thank
Great. Thank you
you,
for having me.
Travonnie.
This was fun. We'll have to keep in
Yes,
touch, Peter.
thank you. See you. Bye bye.
Take care.